Today we are celebrating British Values Day, and today we're going to be looking at different ways of people who can help us in the community. Good morning or good afternoon, Year 1, and today is British Values Day, and we're going to be looking at people who can help us in the community. So we've got a few lessons on people who can help us in the community. And in this lesson today, we're looking at emergency services. So you might have looked at different people who help us in the community, and we're going to look at the emergency services that help us in an emergency situation. So the emergency services are people who help us in an emergency. And an emergency is when there is a danger. Okay, now we're going to be looking at exactly who those people are, and we're going to be looking at some of the vehicles they drive, the uniforms they have, and what to do if there is an emergency, and what the difference between emergency and just risk is. So some of the people who help us in emergency situations are the police. Now I know you've been learning lots about the police, so here are some police officers, and police help us if there is an emergency. Police officers will help us if we think there is a danger or if we get lost. And if you ever see a police officer and you've got lost or you have lost something, they are the people that you can go to and they will help you in an emergency situation. The police officers make sure that our country has no crime. They make sure that people who commit crimes get sentenced, and they make sure that our streets and houses stay safe. So they're there to make sure that justice is served and make sure that we stay safe. And they do that in various ways. Police officers will ride in their cars, and they'll ride horseback, and they will walk around our community and make sure that everything is in order. So police officers make sure that we're safe and make sure that if anything happens that we get looked after. Okay, so for example, if we got lost in the park and we saw a police officer, we might be able to say to that police officer that we were lost. They would help us to find our mums and dads to make sure that we got back safely. Or if someone committed a crime, police officers make sure that that person gets stopped and hopefully the belongings are returned back to that person. Police officers work day and night to make sure that our streets and our homes and our communities and our country stay safe. So here we've got some pictures with different police officers and things that they get up to. What I want you to think about is what you think might be happening in these pictures. We've got a police officer with a dog, we've got a helicopter, we've got police officers talking to someone, and a police officer riding a horse. So you're going to put the video on pause. I want you to have a little think. What do you think these police officers are doing in these pictures? Great, right, well, let's see, what do we think is happening in these pictures? We've got the police officer riding a horse. This police officer might be on a parade, making sure that people are staying safe on the streets. Perhaps they are going to a place where vehicles are not actually allowed, so they're making sure that everyone's being sensible at events. We've got a helicopter. Sometimes police need to get to places very quickly, so they might need to ride in a helicopter to get to somewhere to help someone very quickly. Here we've got a police dog. Now police dogs are very important. They have a very important job. Police dogs often try and look for people. If there's someone who's missing or if there's someone that has committed a crime, police dogs help the police officers to try and sniff out the person. And in the middle, we've got two police officers talking to a person. What do we think they were doing there? Well, they might be asking them some questions. They might be that might be someone who's gone to the police because they need some help. Fantastic. Some other people that help us in emergency situations are firefighters. Now, firefighters have a very important job. Firefighters help us to put out fires. Okay, so if there's ever a fire, either in the house or anywhere in the community, the firefighters are called to put out the fire. And they're called in emergency situations to make sure that the fire stops and doesn't spread. Now, they have a very important job, but their job is also a little bit risky. That's why they have all this special equipment to make sure that they're safe when they help us with fires. So they have masks and they have helmets, and they often bring a giant hose and their fire engine to make sure that they can put out a fire. So here we have some firefighters in action. What do we think some of these firefighters are doing in these pictures? Now, we've got lots of different firefighters. Some of them are with a fire truck, some of them have a hose, and some of them have masks over their face. So what do we think might be happening in these pictures? What do we think these firefighters are doing? Put me on pause and have a think. Well, some of these firefighters are indeed putting out fires, absolutely. They've got their hose and they're making sure that the fire goes out. And some of them have their masks on because when we put out fires, sometimes there's a lot of smoke. So they have to make sure that they're protecting their lungs, and that's why they've got masks on. And we've got firefighters with a fire truck. Why do we think they might have their fire truck? Something to do with the hose, you're absolutely right. Fire trucks actually carry a lot of water, so they drive to the scene and make sure that they've got filled full of water to help put out the fire. Fantastic. Some other people who might help us in emergency are paramedics. So paramedics have a very important job. Paramedics help us when we aren't feeling very well. They help us if we're not feeling well and it's an emergency situation. So we wouldn't always call paramedics if we've cut our finger or if we're feeling a little bit sick. Paramedics help us if we've really hurt ourselves. So if we've broken an arm, or if we've really hit our head hard, or if we're bleeding, or if someone's lost consciousness, paramedics come and they help us out, and they often take us to a hospital where there's lots of other doctors and nurses to help us. Now, paramedics are very important because they often come to the scene and they have to very quickly work out what has happened, and they have to try and help the person who's been injured. Now, paramedics drive in an ambulance and they get to drive very quickly to scenes in their ambulances, and their ambulance is stocked full of things that help people to feel better, and they can then take them to the hospital. Paramedics also drive cars and sometimes bicycles, depending on where the emergency situation may be. So what do paramedics do? Well, what do we think these paramedics are doing in these pictures? We've got some paramedics in their van, we've got some paramedics who are using some equipment, and we've got some paramedics who have some rucksacks on. So what do we think these paramedics might be doing in these pictures? Putting me on pause and having a little think. Absolutely, they are helping people. They're helping people in lots of different ways. They might be going to the person's car with their rucksack and all their medical equipment to make sure that they're getting the right help. They've got a stethoscope where they might be listening to someone's heart, and they've got their ambulance where all their equipment and stuff is stored. And if there's someone who's really injured, they make sure that they put them in the ambulance and drive them to the hospital. So let's see if we can recognize who this is. Okay, so we've got lots of people who can help us. We have the police who can help us, we have paramedics who can help us, and we also have firefighters who can help us. So let's see if we can recognize their uniform. Now, let's have a look. You're looking for clues to see who you think this might be. Is this a paramedic? Is this a firefighter? Or is this a police officer? Thinking about their jobs and what they do. Police officers protect us from any danger and make sure that there's no crime being committed. Paramedics help us when we're injured. Firefighters put out fire. Okay, on the count of 3, I want you to tell me what you think it is. 1, 2, 3. Absolutely, it is a paramedic. We know it's a paramedic because they've got their bag full of goodies that are there to help people, and they've got a luminescent coat in case they have to go somewhere where it's really dark. And if you look really closely on that paramedic, you might be able to see some of their medical equipment in their pockets. And just behind them is the ambulance. Fantastic. Right, let's see our next one. Okay, so who do we think this might be? Is this a police officer, a firefighter, or a paramedic? Thinking again about what you can see in the pictures, what equipment you might see, what their uniform looks like. Who do you think this might be? Putting me on pause. What do we think? Firefighter, absolutely, it is a firefighter. We know it's a firefighter. 1, we can see the large fire engine in the background, but 2, firefighters often have brown or black uniform to help signify who they are. They might also have torches, and sometimes you'll see them with their helmets, but they're not always wearing their helmets. They're often wearing their helmets when they have to go put out the fire. So this is a firefighter. Fantastic. Let's see if we can guess the last one. Okay, so this is a police officer, firefighter, or a paramedic. Looking at what equipment they might have and what their uniform looks like. Can we see any clues on these uniforms as to who these people might be? Ooh, what do we think? Police officer, fantastic. We know it's a police officer. 1, we can see that they're mostly in black and they've got radios on them to help them keep in contact with other police officers about crime in the community. And some of them even have some handcuffs, well spotted, in case they do need to apprehend someone who has committed a crime. Fantastic. So emergency services often travel in a special vehicle. Here we have an ambulance, we have a fire engine, we have a police car, and we also have a paramedics vehicle. Now, they have to get to the scene very quickly if there is an emergency. They have to get there quickly, but safely. So they have lots of things on their vehicle to make sure that happens. These vehicles all have a very distinct look. They all have things that help them. So I want you to really look at these pictures and have a think. What do you think are on these vehicles that will help them to get to a situation a bit quicker? What do they have on them that might help with that? Putting me on pause and having a think. Okay, what do we think? They're brightly coloured. Absolutely, they are brightly coloured. Why do we think they might be brightly coloured? To help them get to a place quicker. It would help them get to a place quicker, but why would it help them get there quicker? Because other vehicles on the road might see who they are and they might move out of the way. Fantastic. What else might help that? They have flashing lights, absolutely. At the top of all the emergency vehicles, they have flashing lights and they normally put a siren on with them, which means there is an emergency and they need to get through. Fantastic, well done. Great, so we've looked at lots of emergency services. We've looked at paramedics, firefighters and police officers. Now they all help us in an emergency situation. Paramedics are there to help us if someone is injured. Firefighters help us if there is a fire. And police officers help us if there's danger or if you get lost. Okay? Now, the way in which they help us is by way of an emergency. If there is an emergency situation, there is something very important we have to do. When there's an emergency, we call it a 999 call. We have to try and get hold of a police officer, a paramedic, or a firefighter to tell them that there is an emergency. So there is one number that calls all three. If we pick up any phone and we call 999, it will put us through to someone who we can tell that there is an emergency. And what happens is you call 999 and the person on the phone will ask you if you need an ambulance, a fire truck, or the police. When you call 999, you're asking for one of those things. When you've told them what you're after, they'll ask you some questions so that they can find out what the emergency is. And this is when you'd give them some more information. Now, 999 is only to be used if there is an emergency. So what do we think emergency means? Emergency has to be something really, really urgent. Okay, if we wanted to call for an ambulance, it would have to be that someone is really hurt for us to call 999 to get an ambulance to come and help us. If we've just cut our finger, we wouldn't need to call 999 because that's not a real emergency. A real emergency is when we really need help and we probably need to go to hospital. Okay? If we needed to call 999 because there was a fire, we would call 999 and we'd ask for the fire service and we'd say that there's a fire. However, if we were cooking in our kitchen with our mummies and daddies and we saw them put on the fire to help cook our food, we wouldn't need to call 999 because that's not an emergency fire at all. But if we saw a fire or we saw lots of smoke, it would be when we'd need to call 999. So we have to make sure that we understand that emergency means it's really, really urgent. And it's not just a small risk, okay? So when we do have an emergency, we call 999. What do we call? Fantastic. So first thing, we call 999. Second step, we're going to tell them what we need, whether we need an ambulance, fire service, or the police service. The next thing is we tell them what has happened. We have to stay really calm, okay? And we have to tell them what has happened, and they will ask us for some information. They might ask us where we are. They might ask us for our name. They might ask us to tell them what has happened. Okay, so let's have a think about emergency situations, okay? Miss Banfield is going to go through some examples and we're going to see if we think this is an emergency and we'd have to call 999. Let's think. Right, the first thing is you've walked into your house and you've seen that mum is on the floor and she's not responding. There's nobody else there. Do we think we'd need to call 999 in this situation? So you're in your house and mum is laying there and she's not responding to you. And you think she's in trouble. You think she's been hurt. What do we need to do? Call 999, absolutely. So you'd need to find a phone in your house. And what do we press? 999. Fantastic. So I'm going to pretend to be calling 999. So I've called 999. Okay, they've picked up the phone. Now I need to tell them that I need, what do I need? I don't need police. I need an ambulance. Well done, because I think that the person is injured. So I'm going to say that I need an ambulance. Now they're going to ask me what's happened. And I can say, my mum is not waking up and she's on the floor. I think she's hurt. They might then ask me who I am and where I live. And then they will send an ambulance to come help. Let's try the next one together. You are on your way home and you see a big fire. And you're with someone who has a phone. What should they do? Call 999 or not? Call 999. Why would they call 999? Because there's a big fire. Do we think there's meant to be a big fire? Probably not. Okay, so we're going to call 999. We've pressed 999. Okay, they've answered. What do we need this time? Do we need the police, the firefighters, or the paramedics? We need the firefighters. There is a fire. Okay, so I've called. Fantastic. They're asking me what's happened. Well, we can say that we've seen a fire. They're probably going to ask us where this fire is, so we'll tell them. And they're going to send a fire engine. Fantastic. Next one. Okay, I've fallen over and I've grazed my knee. What should I do? Would I call 999? No, I wouldn't call 999. Why would I not call 999 this time? Because this is not an emergency. Someone will be able to put a bandage on my knee and I'll be feeling much better. Okay, so it's really important, if we are going to call 999, usually adults call 999, but sometimes if there is a real emergency, it might be something that we have to do. Okay, if there is a parent or mum or dad around, or an older brother or sister, make sure that you're with them too. Okay, but if you do need to call 999, it's because there is a real emergency. Exactly. Someone is hurt, someone is in danger, or there is a fire. Fantastic. So we're going to see if we can figure out if something is a real emergency or if we don't need to call 999 because it's not really an emergency. We're going to have a go at the quiz. Let's see how we get on. Are you ready? What I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to write down your answers. So you even need to write A, B, C, or D. I'll give you some time to pause it and then we'll go through the answers one by one. So this is finding out whether we should call 999. Is this an emergency or is it not? Are you ready? Question number 1. There is a fire. What should you do? A, phone the ambulance. B, look for a fire extinguisher. C, phone the fire brigade. D, phone the police. Making your choice, writing it down. Is it A, B, C, or D? The answer is C, phone the fire brigade. It is phone the fire brigade because we wouldn't put out a fire with a fire extinguisher that large by ourselves, and we'd always get an adult if there was a fire that needed to be put out. That is something that adults do. Fantastic. Let's try number 2. We have broken something in our house. Would we need to A, phone the police, B, phone the fire brigade, C, phone the ambulance, or D, we don't need 999, we'll just carefully get rid of the pieces with help? Would we A, phone the police, B, phone the fire brigade, C, phone the ambulance, D, get rid of the pieces carefully ourselves with help. What do we think? Writing down your answer. The answer is D. We've broken something in our house. That is not an emergency situation. Well done. Okay, question number 3. There is a thunderstorm. What should we do? A, stay indoors. B, phone an ambulance. C, phone the police. Or D, phone the fire brigade. There is a thunderstorm. Do we A, stay indoors. B, phone the ambulance. C, phone the police. D, phone the fire brigade. What do we do if there's a thunderstorm? Writing down your answer. The answer is A. No, it's just a thunderstorm. We do not need to call 999 at all because it's just a thunderstorm. We just need to make sure we stay indoors. Question number 4. Someone in our house is lying on the floor and they seem to be injured. What do we need to do? Now, if we're by ourselves, then we're going to have to do something. Or if we've got someone else with us, they might do it with us. What should we do? A, phone the ambulance. B, phone the police. C, phone the fire brigade. Or D, make some tea. A, phone the ambulance. B, phone the police. C, phone the fire brigade. D, make some tea. We would need to A, they're not responding. That is a time when we'd need to call 999. Obviously, if we was by ourselves, that's something we'd have to do, but hopefully we might have someone with us who would be able to do that. Okay. Question number 5. We have hurt our thumb. It really, really hurts. Do we A, phone the police? B, phone the fire brigade? C, put on a band-aid? D, phone the ambulance? We have hurt our thumb. Do we phone the police, phone the fire brigade, put on a band-aid, or phone the ambulance? We need to 999. No, we don't, because it is not an emergency situation. Fantastic. Question number 6. We spot some fire, some smoke in a building. Now, we don't go in the building and we're with someone. Is that person going to A, phone an ambulance, B, phone the police, C, phone the fire brigade, or D, tell the farmer that it is very unhealthy to smoke? A, phone the ambulance, B, phone the police, C, phone the fire brigade, D, tell the farmer it's unhealthy to smoke. Writing down your answer. The answer of they think there is a fire. Fantastic. Well done, everyone. You've managed to solve the difference between an emergency situation when we need to call 999 and a situation where we wouldn't need 999 because it's not a real emergency. There may be a time when we've hurt ourselves, but it's not something that we'd need an ambulance, a police officer, or a fire officer to help us. Fantastic. Well done, everyone.